The courtroom was silent except for one sound that made my heart shatter into a million pieces. My son Marcus was laughing. Actually laughing as the judge read my sentence. 3 years in federal prison for crimes I did not commit. The handcuffs bit into my wrists, but nothing hurt more than seeing my own child celebrate my destruction. Before we proceed, thank you for watching Her Voice Narrative. Please subscribe and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. Marcus stood up with his wife Chelsea clinging to his arm like a snake wrapped around its prey. They walked toward the exit together, and Chelsea turned back to look at me one final time. Her smile was not just victorious. It was evil. Pure evil. She had won and she wanted me to know it. They disappeared through the courthouse doors, probably already planning how to spend every dollar I had saved over 40 years of hard work. I am 72 years old. My knees ache with every step. My hands shake when I am nervous. But I refused to cry in front of these people who had already decided I was guilty. The officer pulled my arm, forcing me to stand, and I followed him down a long hallway that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. Other prisoners passed by with empty eyes, and I wondered if I would look like that soon. Defeated. Broken. Finished. We reached a small room with cream-colored walls that were peeling and plastic chairs bolted to the floor. An older correctional officer sat behind a metal desk. His badge said Officer James Patterson. His face was lined with deep wrinkles and his eyes looked tired but not cruel. There was kindness there, something I had not seen in weeks. His uniform was perfectly pressed, as if that small act of dignity was the only thing keeping him sane. The escorting officer handed James a folder with my papers and left. The door closed with a sound that echoed in my chest. I was alone with this man who would decide what happened next. James opened the folder and started reading slowly. I sat on one of the plastic chairs, feeling every one of my 72 years in my bones. The handcuffs were still on and the metal had warmed against my skin. I looked down at my hands and thought about how I got here. My own son had done this to me. The baby I held through countless sleepless nights when he had colic. The boy I raised alone after his father died of a heart attack when Marcus was only 10. The man I trusted with everything because he was my blood. My only child. My family. And now he was outside celebrating while I sat in this room waiting to be taken to prison. But they did not know something. Something that would change everything. I had gotten married 6 months ago to a man they knew nothing about. A man whose power reached further than they could imagine. And I had a plan. My fingers trembled as I slowly reached into the inner pocket of my gray jacket. The jacket was old and worn with pockets deep enough to hide secrets. Inside was a folded piece of paper. My last hope. I pulled it out carefully, making sure James was still focused on the documents in front of him. The paper felt warm from my body heat and slightly damp from nervous sweat. On that paper was a name, phone number, and a promise that could save my life. James closed the folder and leaned back. His chair squeaked under his weight. He looked at me with something close to compassion. Transport will be here in 20 minutes, Mrs. Thompson. Do you need anything? Water perhaps? Water please. My voice came out broken and rough. I had not had anything to drink in hours. James stood slowly. His knees cracked just like mine do every morning. He was probably close to retirement with that heavy look that comes from doing a thankless job for too many years. He walked to a small table in the corner where there was a pitcher of water and some plastic cups. His back was turned to me. This was my only chance. With a movement I had practiced in my mind 100 times, I slid the folded note onto his desk right next to my folder. I positioned it so it looked like part of the official papers but visible enough for him to see when he came back. My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it from across the room. My pulse hammered in my ears like thunder. James came back with the water and handed it to me. I took it with my shaking handcuffed hands, grateful for something to hide the trembling I could not control. The water was lukewarm with that plastic taste, but it was the most delicious thing I had tasted in days. James sat down again and his eyes immediately found the note. I saw the exact moment he noticed it. His eyebrows drew together, confused. He stared at the paper as if it had appeared by magic. Then carefully, like it might explode, he picked it up. I continued drinking water, pretending not to notice but watching him from the corner of my eye. Every muscle in my body was tense. Everything depended on this moment. On whether he believed me or thought I was a crazy old woman making up stories. James slowly unfolded the note. His hands were large and rough with scars that told stories of a hard life. I watched every tiny change in his face as his eyes scanned the words I had written last night in my cell with a trembling hand. The note read, "My son does not know who my new husband is. Call David Harrison at this number. Tell him his wife has been arrested. In exchange for this help you will receive a house and a new life for your family." Below was a phone number written carefully in black ink. Each number traced perfectly so there would be no mistakes. James looked up at me. His tired eyes were now completely alert. There were questions there. Hundreds of questions. But most of all there was disbelief. David Harrison. He whispered and his voice shook slightly. The David Harrison. I nodded once, slowly, holding his gaze without blinking. I needed him to see the truth in my eyes. To understand this was not a joke or the fantasy of a desperate prisoner. James' face went pale. He knew that name. Everyone in this state knew that name. David Harrison was not just successful. He was an empire. Real estate. Construction. Development projects worth hundreds of millions. Political connections that reached all the way to the governor's office. A man whose name opened doors that stayed locked for everyone else. And that man was my husband. James looked at the note again, then at me, then back at the note. His hands trembled as he held that small piece of paper containing information that could change both our lives. I saw his throat move as he swallowed hard. His eyes looked wet with something that was not exactly tears but the weight of too many crushed hopes over too many years. He finally said, barely above a whisper, "This is true. It is true." I interrupted softly. Every word. He folded the note carefully, almost reverently, and put it in his shirt pocket. Then he just sat there processing. Trying to understand how David Harrison's wife was sitting in front of him, handcuffed and convicted to 3 years in prison by her own son. How did this happen? James asked, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. How could he not know? How could he not protect you? I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories flow. I had met David 6 months ago. 6 months that had been the happiest of my life after 15 years of crushing loneliness. My first husband, Marcus's father, had died suddenly when I was 57. A heart attack that left me a widow with an adult son who barely visited. For all those years I accepted that loneliness was my life now. I tended my garden, read books, watched television until I fell asleep. Marcus came to visit occasionally, but always in a hurry. Always with excuses about work. And then Chelsea came into his life, and the visits became even rarer. But 6 months ago everything changed. I went to a charity gala downtown. A friend insisted I needed to get out more. To live a little. And there, in front of a table of auction items, I saw him. David Harrison. At first I did not know who he was. I just saw an elegant man with silver hair and a kind smile looking at the same painting I was admiring. We talked about the painting. Then about art. Then about our lives. I discovered he was also a widower. His wife had died 4 years ago from cancer. He told me he came to these events because his wife had loved them and it made him feel close to her memory. I told him about my garden and how the flowers were the only thing keeping me from going crazy with loneliness. We saw each other again the next week. And then again. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks. And before I knew it, I had fallen in love like a teenager. Feeling butterflies every time my phone rang, and it was him. David was honest with me from the start. He told me who he was, what he did, how much money he had. But he asked for something in return. Complete secrecy. He explained that there were people who hated him. Competitors who would not hesitate to use any personal information against him. People he had beaten in business deals who wanted revenge. He told me about threats he had received, attempts at blackmail, situations where people close to him became targets just because they were in his life. And he asked me to keep our marriage secret, at least for a while, until he could ensure I would be safe, until he could organize proper security, until everything was ready. I accepted without hesitation because after so many lonely years David had given me back something I thought was lost forever. The ability to feel alive, to laugh, to wake up every morning excited about the day ahead. We got married in a private ceremony at his estate outside the city. Just the two of us and a justice of the peace with 2 witnesses David had known for decades. It was simple and intimate and perfect. We exchanged plain wedding bands that we wore hidden under our clothes. He kissed my forehead and promised that soon we could live openly, that soon we would not have to hide. But I made a terrible mistake. I did not tell Marcus. I thought it would be temporary. I thought in a few weeks, maybe a month, David would finish setting everything up and then I could introduce him to my son. I could tell Marcus his mother had found love again, that I was no longer alone, that someone was taking care of me and making me happy. But before I could do that, everything fell apart. Started 3 months ago. Marcus showed up at my house without calling first, which was strange. Chelsea was with him as always. They came in with a nervous energy I did not understand. Marcus looked around my house as if he was calculating something. Chelsea touched the furniture and made comments about how old everything was, about how I should modernize and spend some money to make things nicer. Then they asked about my finances. They wanted to know how much money I had saved, how much the house was worth, if I had investments, insurance policies, other properties. I told them I was fine, that I had enough to live comfortably. They should not worry about me. But I did not give details. Something about the way they asked made me uncomfortable. Marcus insisted. He said he had financial problems. His business was failing. He needed a loan. Just temporary, he promised. Maybe $50,000. Maybe more. I told him I did not have that much available immediately, which was true. Most of my money was in long-term investments I could not touch without penalties. But I offered to help with $10,000. All I had in my checking account. Chelsea's face changed. I saw fury flash in her eyes before she hid it. Marcus looked disappointed, but he took the $10,000 and promised to pay it back in 3 months. He never did. A week later they came back. They needed more. $20,000. It was an emergency. An investment opportunity they could not miss. Marcus took my hands and looked at me with those eyes I had known since he was a baby. And I gave in. I withdrew money from one of my funds paying the penalty and gave it to him. That money never came back either. Then the visits became more frequent. Always asking for more. Always with new excuses. New emergencies. I started saying no because I was beginning to understand something was very wrong. That they were using me. That is when everything changed. Marcus arrived one day with documents, contracts, papers filled with legal terms I did not fully understand. He said I needed to sign them. That it was just a formality. A reorganization of family assets to protect me from taxes and legal problems. I told him I wanted a lawyer to review them first. And that is when I saw something in my son's eyes I had never seen before. Something dark and frightening. "Do you not trust me, Mom?" He asked, and there was poison in his voice. "I am your son. Your only family. Are you going to abandon me because of your paranoia?" Chelsea jumped in with that sweet voice she used when she wanted to manipulate. She talked about how hard it had been for Marcus growing up without a father. About how I was all he had. About how he only wanted to protect me. To make sure my future was secure. And God help me, I signed. I signed because he was my son. Because despite everything, despite the distance that had grown between us, despite the fact that Chelsea had changed him in ways I did not like, he was still my boy. The baby I had carried. The child I had raised alone. I could not believe he would hurt me. But I was wrong. 2 weeks later I received a lawsuit. My own son was suing me for fraud. For stealing from family accounts. For forgery. The same documents I signed out of trust were now being used as evidence against me. Marcus had changed them after I signed. He had created a story where I had stolen money from joint accounts we supposedly shared, where I had forged his signature on transactions, where I had acted like a criminal taking advantage of her own son, hired a lawyer, the best I could afford with what little I had left. But Marcus had been careful. He had fake witnesses, bank documents that looked real, emails I supposedly sent even though I never wrote them. It was a perfect trap. And the worst part was David knew nothing. He was out of the country the entire time managing business in Asia. We talked on the phone, but I did not want to worry him with my problems. I thought I could handle it alone. I thought the truth would come out. How stupid I was. The trial was a nightmare. My lawyer did what he could, but the evidence against me was overwhelming. Marcus cried on the witness stand, acting like the heartbroken son betrayed by his own mother. Chelsea testified with fake tears, talking about how I had always been controlling with money, about how I threatened to cut Marcus out of my will if he did not do what I wanted. And the jury believed every word. Guilty. 3 years in federal prison. David returned to the country the day before sentencing, but by then it was too late. I did not have time to contact him, to explain, to ask for help. I was rushed from the courtroom to this processing room. And now here I was telling pieces of this nightmare to a correctional officer who held my only hope in his pocket. My son thinks he won. I told James, and my voice was stronger now. He and his wife think they are going to take all my money, my house, everything I built over 40 years. But they do not know David exists. They do not know he is going to find out what they did. And when he does, I did not finish the sentence. I did not need to. James understood. He took the note out of his pocket and read it again as if he needed to make sure the words were still there. House, he whispered. You can really give me a house. David can. Corrected. And he will. He is a man of his word. If you tell him I ask for this, if you explain what happened, he will reward you. He has properties all over the state. Houses he keeps for investment. He can give you one. He can change your life. James closed his eyes. I saw a single tear roll down his weathered cheek. When he opened them again, he had made a decision. Have a daughter, he said quietly. Sarah. She is 28 with 3 young children. Her husband left them a year ago. Just disappeared. She lives with me and my wife in a small 2-bedroom apartment we can barely afford. The kids sleep in the living room on fold-out mattresses. My wife has diabetes. She needs medication that costs more than we can pay even with insurance. I work overtime whenever I can just to keep us afloat. His voice cracked. If you are telling the truth, if there is any chance this is real, I will make that call. Because my family needs a miracle as much as you do. I held his gaze. Call him, James. Please call him. James took out his phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen and a worn case. His hands shook as he dialed the number I had written. He hesitated for a second, his finger hovering over the call button, as if the reality of what he was doing suddenly hit him. But then he pressed it. The sound of the phone ringing filled the small room. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3 rings. I held my breath. It had been 2 days since I last spoke to David. 2 days that felt like a lifetime. He had called the night before the trial, but I was so upset, so consumed by fear that I could barely talk. I told him everything was fine, that I was just tired, that I loved him. I lied. And now I was paying the price. 4 rings. 5 rings. James looked at me with worry as if he thought no one would answer, that this was all some cruel fantasy. But then the line connected. Harrison. David's voice was crisp and professional. His business tone, the one he used during important meetings. James almost dropped the phone. He cleared his throat, searching for his voice. Mr. Harrison. My name is James Patterson. I am a correctional officer at the County Detention Center. I am calling because... He paused, looking at me for confirmation. He nodded. Because your wife asked me to contact you. The silence on the other end was complete. So absolute I thought the call had dropped. But then I heard David's breathing getting faster. Getting harder. Eleanor. His voice had completely changed. No longer the cold businessman. Now he was a terrified man. What happened to Eleanor? Where is she? She was arrested, sir. Convicted. She is here with me now waiting for transport to state prison. She gave me this number. She says you are her husband. Arrested. The word came out like a roar. When did this happen? Why was I not informed? Where is she right now? James handed the phone to me. My handcuffed hands made it awkward, but I managed. When I heard David's voice so familiar and so loved, something inside me broke. The tears I had been holding back for weeks finally came. David. My voice was barely a whisper. David, I am so sorry. I should have told you. I should have told you everything. Eleanor, my love, what is happening? Talk to me slowly. Where are you? Who arrested you? Wait, Marcus. I said, and my son's name tasted like poison. He framed me. Forged documents. Lied in court. They sentenced me to 3 years, David. 3 years. Silence again, but this time it was different. It was the calm before a hurricane. When David spoke again, his voice was dangerously controlled, but I could hear the fury just beneath the surface. Your son did this. Your own son sent you to prison. He and Chelsea. They planned everything. They wanted my money. My house. They thought I was alone. That no one would protect me. They do not know you exist, David. They know nothing about us. Where exactly are you right now? County Detention Center. Processing room. They are transferring me in 15 minutes. They are not transferring you anywhere. David said, and his tone left no room for argument. Put the officer back on. I handed the phone back to James. He took it with trembling hands. Mr. Harrison. David's voice was so loud I could hear it from where I sat. Listen very carefully. My wife is not getting on that transport. She stays exactly where she is until I arrive with my legal team. Do you understand? Sir, I do not have the authority to stop a scheduled transfer. There are protocols. I am going to tell you something, Mr. Patterson. In 5 minutes, Judge William Rodriguez is going to receive an emergency call requesting a temporary stay of the sentence based on procedural violations. In 10 minutes, you will have a signed order stopping any transfer of prisoner Eleanor Thompson until the case is reviewed. And if anything happens to my wife before I get there, if anyone moves her 1 inch from where she is now, I will personally ensure that every person involved loses their job and faces legal action. Have I been clear? James had gone completely pale. He nodded even though David could not see him. Yes, sir. Perfectly clear. But now put my wife back on. James gave me the phone almost like he was handling something sacred. David. I whispered. I did not know what else to do. I'm so sorry. Do not apologize. His voice softened. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me? None of it. But I need you to listen. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to get you out of there. And your son. That man who dares call himself your family. He is going to pay for every second of pain he caused you. He is still my son, David. Despite everything. He stopped being your son when he decided to betray you. David paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a dark promise. But do not worry about that now. Stay safe. Do not talk to anyone. Do not sign anything. My team will be there in less than an hour. Thomas Martinez, the best criminal defense lawyer in the state, is already on his way. He will handle everything. And James? I asked, looking at the officer who had made this possible. I promised you would help him. He has a family that needs support. Officer Patterson will receive everything you promised and more. David said. After I finish with this, he and his family will never worry about money again. You have my word. James, who had been listening, closed his eyes, and a look of absolute relief washed over his face. It was as if decades of weight had lifted from his shoulders. Love you. I told David, feeling the words were not enough to express what I felt. Thank you for not giving up on me. I would never give up on you. He replied. We are a family, Eleanor. And family protects each other. Stay right there. Do not move. I am coming for you. The call ended. I handed the phone back to James, and we sat in silence processing what had just happened. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes with a sound that seemed unbearably slow. Every second felt like torture. 7 minutes later the phone on James' desk rang. He answered immediately. "Patterson," he said, and then his face transformed. "Yes, sir." "Yes, understood." "Immediately." He hung up and looked at me with amazement and disbelief mixed together. "Judge Rodriguez just issued an emergency stay of your transfer. You have to remain here until your legal representation arrives." He was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Thompson, I do not know who you really are, but your husband just moved mountains in less than 10 minutes. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because finally, after all the pain and betrayal and injustice, something was going right. David was coming. And when David Harrison decided to fix something, nothing and no one could stand in his way. But while we waited as time crawled forward, I could not stop thinking about Marcus. Where was he right now? Probably at some expensive restaurant toasting with champagne. Laughing with Chelsea about how easy it had been to fool me. Planning what to buy first with my money. How to divide the fortune they thought was theirs. They had no idea what was coming for them. They had no idea the most powerful man in the state was about to unleash everything he had against them. They had no idea they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. 45 minutes later the door burst open. A man entered like a storm. He was tall, about 50 years old, in a perfectly tailored dark suit with a leather briefcase that screamed money. His black hair was slicked back. His sharp eyes missed nothing. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never lost a case. "Thomas Martinez." He introduced himself, extending his hand to me and then to James. "I am Mrs. Thompson's attorney and we are leaving here immediately." Behind him came 2 assistants carrying files and documents. Everything needed to start tearing down the lies Marcus had built. And behind them finally came David. My David. He looked exactly as I remembered, but there was something different in his eyes. An intensity one had never seen before. A controlled fury that made the air around him vibrate with dangerous energy. He was 67, but at that moment he looked like a warrior ready for battle. Our eyes met across the room. He crossed the space between us in 3 long strides. He knelt in front of me, not caring that his expensive suit touched the dirty floor. He took my handcuffed hands in his. "My love," he whispered, and his voice was broken. "Forgive me for not being here when you needed me. You are here now," I said as tears ran down my face. "That is all that matters." David stood and turned to Thomas. "I want those handcuffs off her immediately. I want every document reviewed. I want every irregularity exposed. And I want the name of every person involved in this conspiracy against my wife." Thomas smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had found prey. "We are already working on it, Mr. Harrison. I guarantee by tomorrow your wife will be free and those responsible will be answering very difficult questions." David looked at James, who had stood and was watching everything with absolute shock. "Mr. Patterson," David said, walking toward him. "My wife told me you made this call possible. That you risked your position to help her. I want you to know that will never be forgotten." James swallowed hard. "Sir, she needed help. You did more than help. You gave her hope when she had none. And I always pay my debts." David took out his phone and made a call. "Richard, I need you to prepare the house in Maplewood Estates. Yes, the 3-bedroom with a big yard. It is for the Patterson family. I want the deed ready tomorrow and make sure it is fully furnished. Everything they need." James staggered. He grabbed the desk to keep from falling. "Mr. Harrison, I cannot. That is too much. It is not enough." David interrupted. "But it is a start." The next 48 hours were a blur of legal activity I could barely follow. Thomas Martinez worked like a machine, taking apart every document from the case. Finding problems my previous lawyer had not even thought to look for. It turned out Marcus had made mistakes. Small ones, but enough. Dates that did not match. Signatures that were slightly wrong. Witness statements with contradictions nobody questioned because people assumed a son would never betray his mother this way. David took me out of that processing room that same night. Not home directly. That would have been impossible with the court order still active. But to a safe house. One of his properties on the outskirts of the city. The house was a mansion surrounded by perfectly maintained gardens and a high wall that guaranteed complete privacy. There was security everywhere. Men in dark suits with earpieces guarding every entrance and exit. David was taking no chances. He explained that once Marcus found out what was happening he might try something desperate. And David wanted to be prepared. That first night in the mansion after the lawyers left, and we were finally alone, David held me for hours. He did not say much. He just held me while I cried. Years of held-back pain. The pain of being betrayed by my own blood. The pain of being so blind and trusting. "You're not a fool," David said when I finally spoke those thoughts out loud. "You are a mother who loved her son. There is nothing foolish about that. I loved him." I whispered against his chest. "God help me, I still love him. And that is killing me." "No." David pulled back slightly to look into my eyes. "And that is why we are doing this the right way. Not for revenge, though it is deserved. But for justice. For truth. So everyone knows you did nothing wrong." The next morning Thomas arrived with news. He had found something big. One of the witnesses who testified against me at trial. An accountant who supposedly reviewed my finances and found problems. He was willing to tell the truth now. Because it turned out Marcus had not paid him what he promised. And now the accountant was angry and scared of being dragged down when everything unraveled. His name was Peter Collins. A nervous man in his 40s who looked like he had not slept in weeks. Thomas brought him to the mansion that afternoon with a notary and recording equipment. We were going to document every word. Peter could barely look me in the eyes as he sat in the living room David had turned into a legal command center. Papers everywhere. Laptops open. Phones ringing constantly. Like an entire law firm had been moved into this house. "Mrs. Thompson," Peter began, and his voice shook. "I did not know it would go this far. You have to believe me. When Marcus hired me he said he just needed documents reviewed. Numbers adjusted for taxes. He paid me $5,000 up front and promised $20,000 more when it was done. And what exactly did you do?" Thomas asked calmly but with a dangerous edge. "I created fake financial reports. Made up transactions that never happened. Made it look like Mrs. Thompson was moving large amounts from joint accounts with Marcus into her personal accounts. But none of it was real. All fabricated on my computer. And the withdrawals I supposedly made." Asked, feeling sick. "The $150,000 the prosecutor said I stole from my son. Never existed." Peter admitted with tears now streaming down his face. "Marcus gave me access to old bank accounts that were closed. I changed the statements to show recent activity. Altered dates. Invented transaction numbers. Anyone with forensic accounting knowledge would have caught the fraud in minutes. But your lawyer never asked for an independent audit. 'Cause I could not afford it," I said bitterly. "Marcus froze my assets so fast I barely had money for the public defender." Thomas was taking notes furiously. David, who had been standing in the corner with his arms crossed, finally spoke. "Was Chelsea involved in this?" "Marcus's wife." Peter nodded hard. "She was the one who first contacted me. Marcus did not even know who I was initially. Chelsea had been planning this for months, maybe years. She showed me documents. Explained exactly what she needed. It was her plan from the start. Marcus just followed orders. That hurt more than I expected. Part of me wanted to believe Marcus was also a victim. That Chelsea had manipulated him. Poisoned his mind. But hearing he had actively participated. That he willingly followed her orders. Was like a knife to the heart. "Why are you confessing now?" David asked. "Why risk it?" "Because Marcus threatened me," Peter said, his voice breaking. "After the trial, when I went to collect my payment, he laughed in my face. Said I would never see that money. Then he told me if I talked to anyone about what I did he would make sure I was the only one going to prison. That he had documents making me look like the mastermind. Making him look like an innocent victim I tricked. And those documents probably exist," Thomas said. Marcus is smarter than we thought. He created protection layers for himself. But now we have this. David pointed to the camera recording everything. We have confession, proof of criminal conspiracy. And with this we can start tearing down everything they built. Peter's statement was just the beginning. Over the next days, Thomas and his team worked non-stop tracking every move Marcus and Chelsea made in the past 6 months. They found new bank accounts opened right after my arrest. Large transfers scheduled for the day after I was sent to prison. They even contacted a real estate agent about selling my house. My house. The place where I raised Marcus. Where his father died. Where every corner held memories of 35 years of family life. And they were going to sell it without a second thought. Without any guilt. But what broke my heart most was what we discovered a week after my temporary release. Marcus had a daughter from a previous marriage he kept secret from me. A 6-year-old girl named Lily who lived with her mother in another city. And Chelsea in her cruelty had been feeding that child lies about me. She told Lily her grandmother was a criminal, thief, a bad woman who tried to steal her daddy's money. That because of me her dad could not send as much money. That I was why she could not have the things she wanted. We found this out when Lily's mother Rebecca Anderson contacted us directly. She had seen the news because by then the press was covering everything. David Harrison's wife unjustly jailed by her own son. It was the kind of scandal that sold papers and got clicks. Rebecca came to see us bringing Lily with her. The girl was beautiful with Marcus's eyes but with a sweetness in her face my son had lost long ago. When she saw me Lily hid behind her mother scared. Like I was a monster. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said with tears in her eyes. I did not know Chelsea was telling her these things. Marcus barely visits us. When he does she is always there controlling every conversation. I thought she was just being protective. But now I understand she was manipulating everything. I knelt in front of Lily keeping my distance so I would not scare her more. "Hello Lily. My name is Eleanor. I am your grandmother. I know they told you bad things about me but none of it is true. I would never hurt your daddy. I love him. Even now." Lily looked at me with those big innocent eyes. "You are not bad." "No sweetheart I am not." "Then why does daddy say you are?" I had no answer for that. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her father is a liar? That he conspired to send his own mother to prison for money? Could not. I would not destroy her image of Marcus no matter what he did to me. Sometimes adults make mistakes. Finally said. "Big mistakes. Your dad made a very big one. But that does not mean he does not love you." Lily nodded slowly, still unsure but less scared. Rebecca put her hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Marcus never told me you were so kind. He never talked about you at all actually. I understand why now." That night after Rebecca and Lily left, I sat with David in the mansion garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. It was beautiful and peaceful. Completely opposite to the storm inside me. "You have a granddaughter," David said softly. "A granddaughter you did not even know existed." "Marcus hid her from me for years," I replied, feeling a fresh wave of betrayal. "I have a granddaughter and he decided I did not deserve to know her." "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who sends his mother to prison for money." David took my hand. "But now you know her. And if Rebecca agrees you can be part of Lily's life. You can be the grandmother she deserves." "After we finish this," I said, feeling something harden inside me. "After Marcus and Chelsea pay for what they did. Then I can think about being a grandmother." David smiled but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a man who knew justice was close. "Speaking of that, Thomas has news." The prosecutor reviewed the new evidence. "They are dropping all charges against you tomorrow in a special hearing. And issuing arrest warrants for Marcus, Chelsea and Peter for conspiracy, fraud and perjury." Gasp. "Tomorrow. Tomorrow," David confirmed. "But there is more. Marcus organized an event for tomorrow night. A celebration at an exclusive club. He invited friends, family, business partners. He was going to officially announce he inherited your fortune. That he was ready to invest in new businesses. basically celebrating his victory over you in front of everyone. The irony was almost too perfect. What are you thinking? I asked, seeing the calculating look on David's face. I'm thinking, he said slowly, that it would be a shame if he missed his own celebration party. The hearing the next day was quick and devastating. Judge Rodriguez, the same one who presided over my original trial, looked visibly uncomfortable as he reviewed the new evidence Thomas presented. Peter Collins' recorded confession, forensic analysis of the falsified documents, the inconsistencies in testimonies nobody questioned because they seemed too elaborate to be lies. The prosecutor Henry Castillo stood and formally declared the state was dropping all charges against Eleanor Thompson, that there had been a monumental miscarriage of justice, that they had been deceived by a meticulously planned criminal conspiracy. Mrs. Thompson, Judge Rodriguez said, and for the first time since this nightmare began I heard something close to respect in an official voice. On behalf of this court, I offer my deepest apologies. What was done to you is inexcusable. I assure you those responsible will face the full weight of the law. I nodded, unable to speak. Tears ran freely down my cheeks, but these were different tears. Relief, justice, vindication. After weeks of being treated like a criminal, of being looked at with contempt, of carrying the shame of an unjust conviction, someone in authority was finally saying I was innocent. The judge banged his gavel. Arrest warrants are issued for Marcus Thompson, Chelsea Thompson, and Peter Collins on charges of criminal conspiracy, fraud, forgery, and perjury. Officers are authorized to proceed immediately. David, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand. Thomas closed his briefcase with a satisfying click. We had won the first battle. But the war was not over yet. We left the courthouse surrounded by security. Reporters swarmed us, shouting questions, pushing each other to get photos or comments. David shielded me with his body as we made our way to the waiting car. I did not say anything to the press. Not yet. There would be time for statements later. Right now I just needed to breathe. To process that I was finally free. Back at the mansion, David led me to the master suite. He had bought me new clothes, all in my exact size. Elegant dresses, comfortable shoes. Everything a woman would need to feel human again after weeks of humiliation. He prepared a bath with scented oils, candles, soft music playing. Rest, he told me, kissing my forehead. You need to be ready for tonight. Tonight. Marcus' celebration. The event where he planned to boast of his victory. Of the fortune he stole. Of the bright future he thought awaited him. He had no idea arrest warrants with his name were being processed. That police officers were preparing to execute them. That his perfect world was about to crumble in front of everyone. David arranged things so the arrests would not happen until after the event started. He wanted Marcus to have his moment of imagined glory. He wanted him to celebrate, toast, to feel invincible, because the fall would be much harder from that height. And I was going to be there to witness it. I sank into the bath, letting the hot water relax muscles I had kept tense for too long. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that led here. How a 72-year-old woman had lost everything only to discover she had more strength than she ever imagined. More resources, more allies, and a husband who would move heaven and earth to protect her. After the bath, I found a dress laid out on the bed. Deep navy blue. Long-sleeved, falling just below the knees. Perfect for a woman my age. Sophisticated without trying to look younger. It came with a simple pearl necklace and low-heeled shoes I could wear for hours without pain. I dressed slowly, taking my time. I applied makeup carefully, covering the marks of recent weeks. The dark circles, paleness, the stress lines that had aged my face. When I finished, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I was no longer the broken, humiliated prisoner. I was Eleanor Harrison, wife of one of the most powerful men in the state. A woman who had faced betrayal and survived. Ready for battle. David entered, already dressed in an impeccable suit. When he saw me, he stopped. "You are breathtaking," he said with genuine wonder in his voice. I feel like a warrior preparing for battle. I admitted. That is exactly what you are. David smiled, offering his arm. The private club where Marcus organized his celebration was in the heart of downtown. An exclusive place where you needed connections just to get a reservation. Of course, David was a founding member. He invested in the place when it opened, which meant we had full access. No questions. We arrived just as the event was at its peak. Cars lined up at the entrance. Valet rushing back and forth. Well-dressed people coming and going. Laughing. Drinking champagne before even entering. It was the kind of scene that screamed success. Money. Celebration. David instructed the driver to park where we could see the entrance but not be easily seen. He wanted to know exactly who was inside before making our entrance. He wanted the perfect moment. Are you sure you want to do this? David asked, taking my hand. We can still leave. Let the police handle everything. You do not have to face him. I looked toward the building. Toward the bright lights. Toward the laughter I could hear even from here. Somewhere inside was Marcus. My son. The child I carried. Federal raised. The man who betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. I need to do this. I said firmly. I need him to see me. I need him to know he did not win. That he never was going to win. David nodded. He knew there was no changing my mind. He sent a quick text. Seconds later he got a reply. Thomas is inside. He reported. Says Marcus is in the center of everything, showing off. Chelsea is by his side wearing a dress that probably cost thousands. They are serving expensive champagne. Your money, of course. My money paying for their fake celebration. There is more. David continued reading another message. Marcus just made an announcement. Says he is launching a new investment firm. That he has $2 million in capital and is looking for partners. $2 million. I did not even have that much liquid money. There were savings, investments, properties, but not $2 million in cash. Which meant he was lying again. Making promises he could not keep. Deceiving more people. It is time. I said, opening the car door. Robert got out and came to my side, offering his arm. Together we walked toward the entrance. The valet recognized us immediately. His eyes went wide. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison. Good evening. We did not know you were attending. It is a surprise. David said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. We prefer it stays that way for now. The valet nodded quickly and opened the door. Music hit us first. Then laughter. Overlapping conversations. Clinking glasses. The ballroom was huge. Decorated with excessive elegance. Lights hanging from the ceiling. Tables with white cloths. Full bar. Dance floor. And in the center of everything, surrounded by people, was Marcus. My son looked different from the last time I saw him in court. He wore a new expensive suit. His hair perfectly styled. He held champagne in one hand, gesturing with the other as he told some story that made people laugh. Chelsea was attached to his side. Her dress was bright red. With a neckline that left little to imagination. Jewelry hung from her neck and wrists. Probably also bought with my money. She smiled with that satisfied look. The smile of someone who got exactly what she wanted. We stood at the entrance observing. Nobody had noticed us yet. Everyone focused on Marcus. On his celebration. On his moment of glory. Thomas appeared beside us, emerging from the crowd. Everything is ready, he whispered. Police are outside waiting for the signal. The moment you say the word they come in. Not yet, I replied. I want him to see me first. David guided me deeper into the room. Some guests began noticing our presence. I saw expressions change from confusion to recognition to absolute shock. Whispers spread like wildfire. David Harrison is here. And the woman next to him. The woman who was supposed to be in prison. She is here too. The murmuring grew louder. More people turned to look. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. And finally, inevitably, Marcus felt the change in atmosphere. He stopped talking and looked around, trying to understand what captured everyone's attention. His eyes met mine across the room. I saw the exact moment his brain processed what he was seeing. The color drained from his face. The champagne glass nearly fell from his hand. His mouth opened in shock and disbelief. Chelsea followed his gaze. When she saw me, her face transformed into pure horror. The music still played, but nobody danced now. Everyone stared at us. At me standing at the entrance in my elegant dress with my recovered composure. At David by my side with his imposing presence. At Marcus and Chelsea in the center looking like they just saw a ghost. Because to them that is exactly what I was. A ghost from a past they tried to bury. A woman who was supposed to be locked up. Defeated. Destroyed. And instead here I was. Free. Powerful. Accompanied by the most influential man in the state. Marcus put his glass down with trembling hands. Chelsea clung to his arm, her knuckles white. I saw them exchange panicked glances, trying to understand how this was possible. What went wrong? How their perfect plan failed. I started walking toward them. David stayed by my side. Thomas followed steps behind. The crowd parted, creating a path directly to the center. To my son and his wife. The steps seemed eternal. Each one was a declaration. Each one said I survived. Each one said you did not win. Each one said it is your turn to fall. We finally arrived in front of them. Marcus opened his mouth, tried to say something, but no sound came out. Chelsea looked at him desperately, hoping he would fix this somehow. That he would find words to make this nightmare disappear. The silence was absolute now. Even the music had stopped. All eyes on us, waiting. Wondering what would happen next. "Hello, Marcus," I said, and my voice was calm. Controlled. Stronger than I felt in years. "What a nice celebration. Too bad it will not end the way you expected." Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out trembling. What are you doing here? You were supposed to be in prison." I finished for him. "Yes, I know. I was supposed to be locked up for 3 years while you and your charming wife enjoyed my money. While you celebrated your victory. While you erased me from your lives like I never existed." Chelsea tried to regain composure. She straightened her shoulders. Lifted her chin. Trying to project false confidence. "I do not know what you are talking about. This is a private event. You were not invited. You should leave before we call security." David let out a short, humorless laugh. "Security? Please try. This club is 40% owned by me. Security here answers to me before anyone else." Chelsea's face went paler. Her eyes darted around, looking for an exit. A way to escape. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, looking at David with fear and defiance mixed. "What do you have to do with this?" "I am David Harrison," my husband said, and I saw recognition hit Marcus like a physical blow. "And I am your mother's husband. The man you never bothered to ask about. The man whose existence should have made you reconsider every stupid plan you made." The murmurs in the room became audible exclamations. Everyone knew David Harrison's name. Everyone knew what that meant. And now everyone understood Marcus Thompson made the biggest mistake of his life, betraying that man's wife. "It is not possible," Marcus whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You are not married. You never said anything about starting over after years of widowhood." I interrupted. "You are right. I did not tell you. Because you barely visited Marcus. Because when you did, you only came asking for money. Because you stopped being my son long before you decided to send me to prison." Tears threatened, but I forced them back. "Not here. Not in front of him. I had cried enough for this man who was once my baby." Thomas stepped forward, taking out his phone. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson. I should inform you that this morning in a special hearing all charges against Eleanor Thompson were dropped. Judge Rodriguez issued arrest warrants for both of you and Peter Collins for criminal conspiracy, fraud, forgery, and perjury." Chelsea gasped. Her hand flew to her throat like she could not breathe. Marcus staggered, grabbing the table behind him to stay upright. "That is ridiculous," he gasped. "They cannot. They do not have proof. We have Peter Collins' full confession." Thomas continued, his voice cold and professional. "Video recorded under oath with a notary present. He explained in detail how you hired him to falsify financial documents, how you created non-existent transactions, how you manipulated everything to frame an innocent woman. He is lying. Chelsea screamed, her composure finally crumbling. He is framing us to save himself. Nobody will believe a corrupt accountant over us. We also have forensic analysis, Thomas added. Experts examined every document from the original trial. They found digital alterations, manipulated dates, forged signatures. We have technical evidence that cannot be disputed. Marcus began backing away, dragging Chelsea with him. His eyes desperately searched for exits. But David had been thorough. Security guards blocked every door. Discreet but impossible to pass. And there is more. I continued, taking a step closer to my son. We found the bank accounts you opened after my arrest. We saw the scheduled transfers. We found emails with the real estate agent about selling my house. We have every piece of evidence showing exactly what you planned once I was out of the way. We also spoke with Rebecca. David added. Lily's mother. Your daughter Marcus. The granddaughter you hid from your mother for years. She told us how Chelsea has been filling that innocent child's head with lies about Eleanor. How you tried to poison a 6-year-old against her own grandmother. That was my breaking point. Thinking of Lily. That beautiful innocent child being used as a pawn in Chelsea's cruel game filled me with rage I did not know I could feel. How could you? I asked Marcus, and my voice finally broke. How could you do all this? I am your mother. I gave you everything. I sacrificed everything for you after your father died. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to good schools. I stayed up nights when you were sick. I defended you when nobody else would. And this is how you repay me. Destroying my life for money you did not even desperately need. You were always controlling. Marcus spat suddenly, his fear transforming into defensive anger. Always wanting to know everything. Control everything. You never let me live my own life. This money was mine by right. I am your only son. It should have been mine from the start. Then you should have asked like a civilized adult, David said. Instead of conspiring like a cowardly criminal. Thomas lifted his phone and typed quickly. Seconds later the ballroom doors opened. Police officers entered, moving with purpose toward the center of the room. Toward where Marcus and Chelsea were trapped. Marcus Thompson. Chelsea Thompson. One officer announced. You are under arrest on charges of criminal conspiracy, fraud, forgery, and perjury. You have the right to remain silent. The rest was lost in chaos. Chelsea began screaming, trying to pull away as officers handcuffed her. Marcus just stood there motionless. As if his brain finally accepted this was real. That there was no escape. That he had completely lost. Guests watched in horror and fascination. Some took out phones recording everything. This would be on news in minutes. On social media everywhere. The public humiliating fall of Marcus Thompson. The man who tried to destroy his own mother. As officers dragged them toward the exit, Marcus looked at me one last time. I waited to see remorse. I waited to see something indicating the son I knew was still there somewhere. But all I saw was hatred. Pure undiluted hatred. And in that moment I understood the son I loved had died long ago. The man in front of me was a stranger who shared my blood but none of my values. Goodbye, Marcus. I whispered as he disappeared through the doors. The days after the arrest were a media whirlwind I had not expected. My face was on every newspaper, every newscast. The story had everything the press loves. Family betrayal, dramatic twist, clear villain, victim who became victor. But what reporters did not know, what nobody knew yet, was this was far from over. 3 days after Marcus and Chelsea were arrested, Thomas arrived with news that chilled my blood. He discovered something while reviewing more documents. Something none of us anticipated. Mrs. Harrison. He said, his expression grave as he spread papers on the dining table. We found something else. Something that changes the situation completely. David and I leaned in to see. They were deeds. Legal papers full of jargon I could barely understand. But there was one name I recognized immediately. My house. What is this? I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. Marcus did not just plan to sell your house after you went to prison. Thomas explained. He already sold it. Well, technically transferred it into Chelsea's name. 3 weeks ago, before the final trial. He forged your signature on property transfer documents. The house legally is no longer yours. The room seemed to tilt. David held my arm, steadying me. How is that possible? David asked, his voice dangerously calm. How could he transfer property without her present? He bribed a corrupt notary. Thomas replied. The same one who helped with other false documents. We have her name. Sandra Collins. Peter's sister. She authenticated the false signature. Dated documents correctly. Made it all look completely legal. My house. I whispered, feeling tears burn. The house where I raised Marcus. Where my husband died. Where I have 35 years of memories. There is more. Thomas continued, and his tone told me worse was coming. Chelsea already put the house up for sale. She has an interested buyer willing to pay $800,000. Closing is scheduled for a week from now. That cannot be legal, David said. She is arrested. She cannot complete real estate transactions from jail. She posted bail this morning. Thomas informed us. $500,000. We do not know where she got the money, but she is out. Marcus is still inside because his bail is higher. $1 million. Apparently they do not have access to that amount. Where did Chelsea get $500,000? Yes. I thought they froze all accounts related to the case. Thomas exchanged a look with David before answering. We believe she has an accomplice we have not identified yet. Someone with significant resources helping her from the shadows. We are investigating, but so far no concrete evidence. The idea there was someone else involved. Someone still helping Chelsea even after everything was exposed filled me with fear I had not felt during the trial. Because if there was someone else, someone with enough money to pay $500,000 bail without hesitation, then this was much bigger than we imagined. I need my house back, I said firmly. They cannot keep it. Not after everything. We are working on it, Thomas assured me. We filed emergency lawsuit this morning to nullify the property transfer based on forgery. But legal processes take time. Meanwhile, Chelsea is technically the legal owner. She can sell before we stop her. Then we stop her another way. David said, pulling out his phone. If she wants to play dirty, we will show her what playing dirty really means. I spent the next hours listening to David make calls. He contacted judges, lawyers, private investigators, people whose power and influence were evident in how they responded immediately. It was like watching a master at work, moving pieces on a chessboard I could barely see. That evening, Thomas returned with a team of investigators. They had been following Chelsea since her release. And what they discovered was worse than any of us imagined. She went directly to her home, reported one investigator, a man named Frank, the same correctional officer who made the initial call to David. But she was not alone. There was a man waiting. We identified him as Richard Anderson, Rebecca's ex-husband, Lily's father, the man who abandoned his family. He is the accomplice. David asked, his voice filled with disgust. Seems he never actually left. Frank explained. We tracked his finances. He has offshore accounts with over $3 million. Money he apparently earned in illegal businesses over the last 5 years. And it turns out he met Chelsea 2 years ago. Long before she married Marcus. She saw an opportunity in your family. Seduced Marcus specifically to get close to your money. The room fell silent as we processed this. Chelsea had been planning this for years. She met Richard. Saw opportunity in my family. Seduced Marcus specifically to get my money. Everything calculated. Meticulous. Malicious from the start. Then Marcus was also a victim. I murmured, feeling a strange mix of rage and pity. That does not excuse him. David said firmly. He chose to go along. He chose to betray you. Victim or not, he has to pay for his actions. There is more. Frank continued. We overheard part of their conversation. Chelsea and Richard are planning to flee the country. They have tickets bought for tomorrow night to Brazil. They plan to sell the house quickly, take the money, disappear before the legal system reaches them. Not if we stop them first, David said. Frank, I need you monitoring them. Every move, every call, every person they contact. Thomas, prepare court orders to block any property sale. Contact immigration. I want their names on every watch list, every airport, every border. They are not leaving this country. The operation was set in motion with efficiency that left me astonished. David had resources I never imagined. People in key positions who owed him favors, who respected his name, who would act without asking why. Within hours we had surveillance on my house, court orders being processed, alerts at every exit point in the country. But I wanted more. It was not enough to stop them legally. I needed to face them. I needed them to know I discovered everything, that their plan failed again, that they were never going to win. I want to go there, I told David that night. My house. I want to see it one last time before this ends. David looked at me with concern. It is dangerous. Chelsea knows you are there. Her know. I interrupted. I want her to know. I want to look her in the eye and tell her exactly what I think. Of everything she did. Of how she destroyed my family. David sighed but understood. He knew that need for closure. For final confrontation. Then we go together, he said. But with full security. I will not risk your life for satisfaction. We arrived at my house at dusk. The place that had been my home for 35 years looked different now. Almost strange. Like it no longer belonged to me. Lights were on inside. I could see shadows moving behind curtains. Chelsea was there. Probably packing. Preparing for her planned escape. David insisted on bringing security. 2 cars with guards followed at safe distance. Frank was in one monitoring every move. We had constant communication with Thomas, ready to intervene legally any moment. Are you sure about this? David asked one more time as we approached the front door. We can still turn back. I'm sure. I replied, even though my heart pounded so loudly I felt it might jump out of my chest. I used my key. The same one I used for decades. Wondering if Chelsea had been careless enough not to change locks. The door opened with a soft click. We entered the foyer, and the familiar scent of my home hit me with a wave of nostalgia so strong I had to stop to regain composure. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The house was almost empty. Furniture I bought carefully over years. Photographs on walls. Memories of a lifetime. Everything was gone. Only the largest pieces remained. The ones difficult to move quickly. My God. I whispered, walking into the living room. They took everything. Everything of value. David squeezed my hand, his face hardened with rage. We continued passing through rooms systematically emptied. My bedroom, where I slept next to my late husband for years, was completely stripped. They even took curtains. Voices came from the kitchen. One definitely Chelsea. The other male. Probably Richard Anderson. We approached quietly, staying out of sight as we listened. Are you sure the buyer closes tomorrow? Richard was asking. We cannot risk delays. She confirmed this morning. Chelsea replied, her voice full of satisfaction. 800,000 transferred directly to my offshore account. By tomorrow we will be on the plane with over 2 million between the house and what we took from the old woman's accounts before they froze them. And Marcus? Richard asked. Do you not think he will be a problem when he finds out you left without him? Chelsea let out a cruel laugh that chilled my blood. Marcus was useful as long as I needed him. But he was too weak. Too emotional. He almost ruined everything with his stupid guilt. No, it is better leaving him behind. Let him rot in prison thinking his wife abandoned him. It will be what he deserves for being so pathetic. I had heard enough. I walked into the kitchen with David right behind me. Chelsea stood by the table surrounded by boxes. Richard was on the other side. A large man with a hard expression who looked at me with surprise. Hello, Chelsea. I said, keeping my voice firm even though I trembled inside. Interesting conversation. Chelsea's face transformed from surprise to terror instantly. She dropped the box she held. Contents scattered across the floor. I recognized the objects. My antique jewelry box. Framed photographs. Small antiques I collected over years. How did you get in? She demanded, partially regaining composure. This is my house now. You are trespassing. A house. I repeated bitterly. Based on forged documents and a corrupt notary. Did you really think you would get away with it? Richard took a step forward, his posture threatening. You should leave now before this gets ugly. David moved to partially block me, his voice cold as ice. I suggest you stay exactly where you are, Mr. Anderson. We have security personnel surrounding this house waiting for my signal. One wrong move and this ends very badly for you. As if to emphasize, Frank appeared at the back door followed by 2 security guards. Richard looked around, calculating options. Apparently decided he had none. We also have your tickets to Brazil. I continued, taking out my phone, showing the screen with flight confirmations. And your offshore accounts. The 3 million you thought nobody could track. Everything is being frozen right now by court order. Color drained from Chelsea's face. Her eyes moved frantically, looking for an exit that did not exist. You cannot prove any of this, he said weakly. Just accusations without evidence. We have audio recordings of your conversation from 5 minutes ago, David said. Where you admitted stealing 2 million and planning to flee. Where you admitted using Marcus and planning to abandon him in prison. I think that counts as sufficient evidence. Furthermore, I added, feeling dark satisfaction growing. Sandra Collins, the notary you bribed, has already confessed everything. She faced losing her license and possible prison, so she decided to cooperate fully. We have documents, bank transfers, text messages, everything documented. Chelsea slumped into a chair, all arrogance evaporating. For the first time since I met her, I saw her as she really was. A scared con artist finally caught. Wait, I asked, needing to understand. Why did you do all this? Was it really worth destroying a family? Ruining lives? All for money? Chelsea looked at me with empty eyes. Because people like you have everything without effort. Nice house. Money saved. Respect. While the rest of us fight for every penny. I saw an opportunity and took it. That is all. Well, I said firmly. I worked for everything I have. Years of sacrifice. Saving every dollar. Living modestly to have security in old age. You just wanted to steal what you did not earn. Sirens began sounding outside. Thomas requested police once we confirmed enough evidence for additional arrests. Officers entered moments later with updated arrest warrants for Chelsea and a new one for Richard on conspiracy and money laundering charges. As they handcuffed them, Chelsea looked at me one last time. Marcus really hated you, you know. She spat with venom. I did not have to convince him much. He wanted your money as much as I did. Her words hurt but no longer had power to destroy me. Because I knew the truth now. My son chose this path. And he would live with consequences. Goodbye, Chelsea. I said as they took her out of my house. I hope the money was worth it. When they were finally gone, I stood in my empty kitchen surrounded by remnants of my plundered life and finally allowed tears to flow. David hugged me, holding me as I cried for everything I lost. For the family I would never have again. For the son I loved who was now lost forever. But I also cried with relief. 'Cause it was finally over. The nightmare was finally over. 6 months later, I was standing in the garden of my completely restored house. David insisted on hiring the best restorers, decorators, artisans to return my home to its original glory. Every piece of furniture Chelsea stole was replaced by something even more beautiful. Walls repainted. Floors polished until they shone. Like the house had been purified of all darkness. But most important was who was with me in that garden. Lily was running between the flowers I planted especially for her. Her laughter filling the air with music I did not know how much I needed to hear. Rebecca was sitting on a patio chair watching her daughter with a peaceful smile. She had finally found stability. Good job. And most importantly, she completely removed Lily from her father's toxic influence. Because Richard Anderson was in prison, sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy, fraud and money laundering. Chelsea was serving 12 years in federal prison. All her assets confiscated. All her accounts emptied to pay restitution. And Marcus, my son, was serving 8 years for his role in the conspiracy. The judge was more lenient with Marcus than the others, recognizing he was manipulated to some extent by Chelsea. But he still had to pay for his actions. For signatures he forged. For documents he knowingly presented as false. For betraying his own mother in the cruelest way. I tried visiting him in prison once. 2 months after his conviction. I thought maybe after everything we could start some kind of healing. But when I arrived at the visiting room and saw his face through the glass, all I found was bitterness and resentment. "You came to gloat," he said through the phone. "To show me how well you are doing while I rot here. I came to see if there was still anything left of the son I raised." I replied calmly, "But I see there is not. That son died when you decided to marry your millionaire and keep it secret." He spat. "If you told me the truth from the start, none of this would have happened. None of this would have happened if you had not decided to rob me and send me to prison." Corrected. "You made those decisions, Marcus. Nobody else." He did not respond. Just looked at me with pure hatred. And in that moment I understood there was no redemption here. No forgiveness or reconciliation. My son was gone. Replaced by this bitter stranger who blamed everyone but himself. I got up to leave. But before hanging up the phone I said one last thing. "Despite everything, I wish you peace, Marcus. I hope one day you find a way to forgive yourself. Because I have already forgiven you. Not for you, but for me. So I can move on without carrying this weight." I did not wait for his response. I just left. And I had not been back since. But today, in this garden full of life and light with my granddaughter laughing and my new family around me, I finally felt I had closed that painful chapter. David came out carrying a tray with fresh lemonade and cookies we baked together that morning. Grandma, look what I found." Lily shouted, running toward me with a butterfly in her small hand. "Can I keep it?" "Butterflies need to be free, honey," I told her, kneeling to her level. "But you can watch her for a moment, then let her go so she can return to her family." Lily nodded, seriously studying the insect with fascination. Rebecca came closer, putting her hand on my shoulder. "Thank you for everything you have done for us," she said softly. "Not just financial support, though that has been incredible, but for giving Lily a real grandmother. Someone who loves her unconditionally. The pleasure is entirely mine." I replied sincerely. "Lily has given me a purpose I did not know I needed." David sat next to me on the garden bench, putting his arm around my shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange life is," I said. 6 months ago I was in a processing room handcuffed, believing my life was over. And now I am here surrounded by people who truly love me. In a house that is truly mine. With a future I never imagined possible. And with a husband who would do anything for you." David added with a smile. I smiled back. "With a husband who moved heaven and earth to save me." James Patterson, the correctional officer who made all this possible, was also thriving. David kept his promise. James and his family now lived in a beautiful house in Maplewood Estates, completely paid off. His wife received the medical treatment she needed. His daughter Sarah got a good job at one of David's companies. His grandchildren had their own rooms for the first time. James came to visit occasionally. Always shy. Always grateful. Still unable to fully believe a simple act of kindness transformed his life. "I just made a call," he always said. "You did more than that, James," I replied. "You gave me hope when I had none. And that is priceless." As the sun began setting over the garden, Lily finally released her butterfly and ran to sit on my lap. David took my hand. Rebecca started preparing dinner in the kitchen. And for the first time in what seemed like decades, I felt something I had forgotten existed. Complete peace. It was not the ending I imagined when I married David a year ago. It was not the family I dreamed of having when Marcus was a baby in my arms. But it was my family now. A family built not by blood but by choice, by kindness, by genuine love.